Chapter 1405. Battle, defeat the enemy, refine the mystic light. The cycle repeated. In the following days, Lu Yi continued with this process. He could fight at least 20 rounds with others every day. With every victory, he would receive a mystic light as a reward. Casually refining it was equivalent to swallowing 10 spiritual jades. In other words, in this constellation hall, he refined at least 200 spiritual jades every day. This was the result of half a month of normal cultivation. He could clearly feel that his cultivation was steadily increasing. The most obvious sign was the increase in the refinement of his bone marrow essence. For someone like him, the opening of the Constellation Hall was definitely a good opportunity to rapidly increase his cultivation. Even if the others were not as efficient as him, they would have no problem fighting 4 or 5 rounds. No matter which race's constellation, the consumption of spiritual jades could not reach 40 to 50 in a day. And this was the reward for defeating a mid-stage constellation's early stage. Lu Yi heard from Pu Ku that if he defeated a late-stage constellations, the reward would be even more generous. Unfortunately, he did not meet any in these few days. Because the opponents that the Constellation Hall arranged for him were all mid-stage constellations. Not to mention late-stage, there was not even an early-stage constellations. With his current strength, these opponents with the same cultivation as him, no matter which sect they belonged to, were all kept at a distance of 25 kilometers. Only a mid-stage constellation's foundation was not bad. With the help of a powerful defensive spiritual treasure, he advanced to a distance of 40 kilometers. In the end, he still fell short. After a few days, Lu Yi finally met a late-stage constellation's opponent. This should be the Constellation Hall's rules automatically adjusted. Because Lu Yi won the previous battles too easily, the Constellation Hall's rules had already determined that he had late-stage strength. Naturally, they would arrange a corresponding opponent for him. This was expected, but it still could not stop Lu Yi's invincibility. As early as the early-stage constellation, Lu Yi could already compete with the late-stage constellations of the dwarf race. Although the dwarf race's constellation's foundation was slightly weaker than the other races due to their own reasons, late-stage constellation was still late-stage. Their cultivation could not be faked. Now that Lu Yi's cultivation had increased considerably compared to before, it was naturally easy for him to deal with ordinary late-stage constellations. The only difference was that the late-stage constellation's distance he met was slightly further, but they were unable to get any closer than 10 kilometers. There were also those who exchanged spells with him from dozens of kilometers away, but they were also beaten into submission. In terms of the orthodox Tao of spells, Lu Yi was naturally inferior to the orthodox Tao cultivators. After all, they had been immersed in this Tao for many years. Lu Yi's casting of spells basically relied on the spirit patterns on the talent tree, as well as the various experiences he had obtained when imprinting the dragon soaring realm's origin. Therefore, he couldn't use any profound techniques. What he used were all very simple techniques. However, he was able to use them at a very high frequency, and his attack range was very far. His spiritual energy was purer than that of a normal person, so his techniques were much more lethal. Quite a few powerful magic cultivators had been defeated in such a muddle-headed manner. After many battles, Lu Yi gained many benefits. At the same time, his horizons were broadened. In the battle for the deity sea on the reincarnation tree, Lu Yi had seen the unique abilities of many races, but he hadn't fought many people there. However, it was different this time. Every day, he had to fight many battles with people. There were all kinds of races in the starry sky, and they would do anything to win. In this kind of situation, it was hard not to open his eyes. Another battle began. The arena was a stretch of ruins, with dilapidated walls and dilapidated walls. It was extremely desolate, like the scene after a powerful sect was destroyed. When Lu Yi appeared, he quickly sensed his opponent, a late-stage constellation cultivator called Wei Yijian. When their divine senses clashed, Wei Yijian's body had already turned into sword light, and he rushed towards Lu Yi. His actions were straightforward, very much like a sword cultivator's straightforward demeanor. Lu Yi stood in place calmly as usual, facing the direction of his opponent's attack, and raised his hand to cast a fire dragon technique. Several dozen kilometers away, Wei Yijian's sword light swayed slightly, easily avoiding the fire dragon technique's attack, and continued to close the distance. Under Lu Ye's control, the fire dragon technique that had hit empty air turned around and chased after him. At the same time, a new fire dragon was launched. Wei Yijian's speed was undoubtedly very fast. After all, he was a sword cultivator and could easily dodge the incoming fire dragons. In the blink of an eye, there were several fire dragons following behind him. Looking from afar, the fire dragons seemed to be his own method, bringing with them the power of thunder as they pounced towards Lu Yi, their momentum aggressive. Lu Yi instantly understood this guy's plan. The other party obviously didn't want to waste his spiritual power to block his fire dragons, and only wanted to get rid of him. Because as long as he got rid of him, no matter how many fire dragons there were, they would be useless without anyone controlling them. As the sword cultivator with the most ferocious killing power, his actions undoubtedly showed his powerful self-confidence. Lu Yi could keep people at bay before because they had to block his technique. If they didn't block and only dodged, Lu Yi couldn't force them. In the blink of an eye, the distance between them was only 15 kilometers. Looking at the other party's posture, he would probably reach him in 2 breaths. If a true spell cultivator was closed in by a sword cultivator to this extent, he would have already lost. Because at this distance, the other party would be able to use all his techniques. The sword light on Wei Yijian's body suddenly brightened, and with a clear sword cry, sword light filled the sky. It was also at this moment that a large number of techniques suddenly formed in front of Lu Yi. Fire dragons, fire phoenixes, golden arcs, flame flames, water swords, leaf dances, and so on. Wei Yijian, who was in the middle of a thunderous attack, was stunned. He was a late-stage star constellation cultivator, with a lifespan of several hundred years, and had fought countless people in his life. He had also seen many different kinds of spell cultivators, but this was the first time he saw someone who could cast techniques so quickly. Even if these techniques were the most basic and simple techniques, what was even stranger was that these techniques were of various attributes. The moment the spell was formed, it rushed towards Wei Yijian from all directions. He frowned, and in that instant of hesitation he made a decision. Only attack and not defend. The sword light that filled the sky turned into a long river, slanting towards Lu Ye's location. The brilliant power caused the entire battle space to tremble. Lu Ye's figure was immediately drowned by the sword light. Along with him, Wei Yijian was also drowned. The many techniques that Lu Yi had used just now, and the fire dragons that were chasing him directly attacked him from the front and back. The sword light retracted, and the light of the techniques dissipated. Lu Yi appeared in his original position, unharmed. On the surface of his body, the light of the holy protection spirit patterns slowly disappeared. It had to be said that the killing power of a sword cultivator was truly strong. When the sword light covered the sky, even if Lu Yi relied on the newly deduced holy protection to protect himself, several layers were still scraped off. If it was a normal person, they could only rely on their defensive spirit treasure to block, unable to dodge. A cold killing intent locked onto him. In the blink of an eye, the slightly battered Wei Yijian was already charging over with a sword river. Lu Yi was unharmed, but he was not. Compared to the killing power that spread through the starry sky, the defense of a sword cultivator was never much, especially when he only attacked and did not defend himself just now. A cold voice sounded, "I was wondering why I encountered a middle-stage cultivator. So you really do have this kind of ability." When he had discovered that Lu Ye's cultivation was only at the middle stage of the constellation realm, Wei Yijian had already been on guard. In a place like the Constellation Palace, if he encountered a cultivator with a lower cultivation than himself, he definitely should not be happy too early, because the other party was very likely not arranged to be here because they were weak, but because they were strong enough. Wei Yijian had only heard of such a thing, but he had not expected to encounter it himself. Just now, it had only been a simple exchange of blows, but it had already allowed him to determine the strength of his opponent. But sword cultivators were not afraid. It could even be said that the stronger the opponent, the more it could stimulate his fighting spirit. His voice continued, "But your name is too big. I'm afraid you won't be able to handle it." Dharma supremacy, Dharma supremacy, Dharma supremacy, Dharma supremacy, Dharma supremacy, clearly meant this, so Wei Yijin felt that this guy was definitely an arrogant and savage person. This kind of person's strength was not weak, but that was all there was to it. Fa Wuzuan was still using spells to attack. However, under Jianhe's powerful attack, his spells couldn't do anything. In the blink of an eye, Jianhe was not far from Lu Yi. It looked like he was about to be enveloped by Jianhe. However, a scene that made Wei Yijin feel astonished appeared. Almost at the instant the sword river was about to reach him, a pitch-black saber suddenly appeared in Dharma Supremacy's hand, and then he crashed into the sword river. The bright saber light exploded like a sun, extremely aggressive and ruthless aura sweeping in all directions, actually making his aura somewhat unstable. The sword river formed by boundless sword energy instantly melted like snowflakes under the sun, starting to melt from the place where the strong enemy had charged in. Compared to the other's calmness and gentleness when using spells just now, this Dharma supremacy was like a mad dog that had been let out of a cage. Wei Yijin immediately understood one thing. This Dharma supremacy looked like a Dharma cultivator, and also did things like a Dharma cultivator, but in reality, he was a weapon cultivator. He actually encountered this kind of person. Wei Yijin was speechless. He had also heard that some people would hide their true sect, pretending to be from another sect, but this kind of disguise was mostly superficial. Once they fought, it was easy to be exposed, because a cultivator's energy was limited and it was impossible for them to achieve success in two different sections. But he had not noticed anything strange before, until this Dharma supremacy took the initiative to reveal himself. Dharma supremacy's disguise as a Dharma cultivator was enough for him to take him seriously. Now that he had revealed his true abilities, he immediately felt the pressure. When the sword river collapsed, two figures appeared, Dharma supremacy's saber light and sword energy wreaking havoc, their figures moving about, locked in a fierce battle. This was an eye-opener for Wei Yijin. He had heard of two situations before, and now he saw them in one go. Lu Yi also had the same feeling. He had heard Pu Ku say before that some Constellation Realm cultivators clearly had the qualifications to advance to Yu Yao, but they kept delaying it. They were waiting for the Constellation Hall to open, because if they could leave their names on the Constellation Hall ranking, they would be able to obtain many benefits. End of chapter. Chapter 1406. This was especially true for the constellations from the top realms. They were willing to wait a few more years for a better future and greater benefits. Of course, there were also many constellations that could not advance to the Yu Yao realm and wanted to use the final reward from the Constellation Hall to break through their bottleneck. But no matter what, these two types of people had already reached the limit of the Constellation realm and were the strongest in this realm. Especially the former type of people, their strength was not something an ordinary late-stage constellation cultivator could compare to. There were many obstacles in a cultivator's life. The first obstacle was to open the spiritual cavities. Only when one opened a certain number of spiritual cavities could one be qualified to advance to the Cloud River realm and have the capital to aspire to a higher realm. Otherwise, one would not be able to go far just by advancing to the Cloud River realm. The Cloud River realm and the True Lake realm did not have many bottlenecks. When one's cultivation reached a certain level, the realm would naturally advance. But then, advancing from the True Lake to the Deity Ocean was another major obstacle because of the birth of the Deity Ocean. Not every True Lake could give birth to a Deity Ocean. Those who could not give birth to a Deity Ocean and nurture a soul avatar could only stagnate. In the future, the bottleneck of advancing from the Deity Ocean to the Constellation Realm was not difficult. The difficult part was competing with others for this opportunity. Every large realm had a limit to the number of constellations that could be born in a certain period of time. The strength of the realm's foundation also varied. Take the 9 states for example. As the foundation of the realm increased, it became easier for cultivators to cultivate. In the future, there would be many Deity Ocean cultivators, but there were only so many places to advance to the Constellation Realm. The Deity Ocean cultivators would definitely fight for it. But advancing from the Constellation Realm to the Yu Yao realm was another major obstacle because it involved the transformation of spiritual power. This was related to the foundation that the cultivator had built in the past. Take the Qinglidao realm, where Tang Jun came from, as an example. For more than 3,000 years, there were many constellations. But until now, there were only 3 Yuyao. Qin Yuandai was killed by Lu Ye's red talisman. Now that Tang Jun was in the Wanxiang Sea, there was only 1 Wu Zhuo left in the Qinglidao realm. The situation in the Qinglidao realm was more special. But no matter what, advancing from the constellation realm to the Yuyao realm was not easy. Lu Yi did not know what kind of person Wei Yijin was, but he guessed that he was the kind of person who could advance to the Yuyao realm but did not. In the face of such a powerhouse, it was no longer possible for Lu Yi to win by relying solely on his spells. Thus, Lu Yi made the prompt decision to bring out his true abilities. In comparison, Wei Yijin's strength was much stronger than Zhao Tianmu's. This battle was in full swing, and Wei Yijin's various mysterious methods and powerful attacks caused Lu Yi to suffer a lot. After a full hour, Wei Yijin took the initiative to admit defeat and leave. Lu Ye's close combat forced him to maintain a high level of explosive power. After a long time, he found it difficult to continue. Moreover, he could feel that even if he still had enough spiritual energy, he was no match for Fa Wuzuan. Because in the fierce battle, he had slowly fallen into a disadvantageous position. He didn't say anything, and only took a deep look at his opponent, as if he wanted to remember his appearance in his heart. When Wei Yijin's figure dissipated, a mass of profound light fell from the sky. As expected, there was no change in the benefits he obtained from activating the talent tree. It was the same as when he was dealing with the other Constellation Hall advanced stage cultivators. It was only equivalent to him refining 20 spirit jades. Defeating a middle stage cultivator was equivalent to refining 10 pieces, while defeating a late stage cultivator was equivalent to refining 20 pieces. However, the amount of time and energy required was greater, so it was hard to say which situation would give him more benefits. Returning to the hall, Lu Yi casually found a place to rest and reorganize. He didn't need to worry about being ambushed here, because as long as he entered the hall, everyone would be under the protection of the Constellation Hall. A few days later, the hall was still as lively as before. Some people even set up stalls here, selling healing pills and recovery pills. The price was naturally more expensive than normal, but if one wanted to return to the Wanxiang Sea to buy them, they would need to hurry and waste a lot of time. Therefore, if a cultivator needed something, they would choose to buy it here. It was said that the hall numbered 88 was the most lively, because many people had set up stalls there. Even the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce had a stall there. As long as one greeted them, they could have whatever they wanted delivered. That large hall had also become a large hall for cultivators to trade. The cultivators that came and went were all there to buy and sell things. After a short rest, Lu Yi continued on his journey. Although the Constellation Hall would be open for a long time, it was a rare opportunity, so he naturally had to cherish it. In the next few days, Lu Yi kept going back and forth between the various battle arenas and the Constellation Hall. Every day he gained a lot. It could be said that he had experienced hundreds of battles and had never been defeated. The cultivators he encountered were basically all late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators, and most of them were ordinary late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators. Only a few of them were like Wei Yijin. Every time he encountered this kind of person, Lu Yi was forced to use his true abilities to win. There was even one battle that could be said to be a Pyrrhic victory. The strength of the opponent in that battle was almost the same as Wei Yijin, but the opponent had a spirit treasure with unfathomable power. In that battle, Lu Yi was almost heavily injured. This experience secretly reminded him that in terms of pure strength, he might not lose to any of the Constellation Realm cultivators, but cultivators didn't just rely on their own strength. There were also some unpredictable external forces, especially spirit treasures, which had all kinds of strange powers. The slightest bit of carelessness could cause one to fall into the opponent's trap. After cultivating to the Constellation Realm, who didn't have a few suitable spirit treasures in their hands, especially those fellows who came from peak forces, the power of their spirit treasures was especially great. However, after fighting with people many times, Lu Yi also discovered one thing. Even with the same cultivation, the difference in strength between cultivators was also very large. Some people clearly had extraordinary cultivation, but lacked battle experience, so they appeared to be unable to withstand a single blow. Half a month after the Constellation Hall opened, when Lu Yi returned from another battle, he shockingly discovered that in the hall, a group of people were gathered around the ranking board, watching from the sidelines. Looking up, Lu Yi suddenly understood. There were changes in the ranking board. All along, this thing had been a blank black tablet, but everyone knew that some names would eventually be recorded on it. It was just that the time had never been up. Until today, it was finally revealed. A voice was heard. "What's up with these people? How can their accumulations be so high? I'm actually not even a fraction of their total." Someone said, "These people all have extraordinary backgrounds. Their cultivation has already reached perfection in the constellation realm, so they don't need to refine their profound light. They only need to battle, which naturally saves time." This conjecture was reasonable and was undoubtedly convincing, because the time a cultivator spent in the Constellation Hall could be divided into 3 categories. The first category was naturally the time spent fighting others. The second category was the time spent refining profound light. The third category was the time spent recuperating from injuries. In comparison, refining the profound light took a lot of time. Several hours had passed in the blink of an eye. Like Wei Yijian, who could casually advance to Yu Yao's constellation realm, he didn't need to refine profound light. At most, after a great battle, he would casually refine it to recover the spiritual power he had expended. This way, he would naturally save a lot of time, and he could participate in more battles, which meant he had a chance to obtain more chips. On the ranking board, the top 10 had accumulated more than 300 chips, and the highest was even close to 400. In other words, he had won as many battles as he had accumulated in this half a month. Below the top 10 and within the top 20, they all had around 300 chips. The difference wasn't great. Only after reaching the top 100 did the number of chips fluctuate slightly. Lu Yi looked up to search for his name on the ranking board, and quickly found Fa Wuzuan. He was tied with 2 other people at the 15th place. This was within his expectations. He didn't think that he would definitely be able to get first place just because he had the advantage of the talent tree. Just as that person had said, many people didn't need to refine the profound light. No matter how fast he refined it, it would still take some time. Others could save this time and accumulate it. Naturally, they would participate in more battles than he did, and the accumulated points would undoubtedly be more. He had never underestimated others. The ranking board didn't just record the cultivator's name, the number of chips they had accumulated, and their winning percentage. For the time being, the top 100 cultivators' winning percentage was basically 100%. Only Wei Yijian and a few other familiar names, Lu Yi, were at 99%. They were quite eye-catching. If nothing unexpected happened, their winning percentages were all taken down by Lu Yi. As he watched, the names on the ranking board flickered continuously. Some rose, some fell, and some fell completely off the ranking board. There were at least 1 million constellations participating in such a grand event, but only 1,000 names were recorded on the ranking board. Therefore, cultivators outside of the top 1,000 couldn't leave their names on the ranking board. Lu Yi was temporarily ranked 15th. After observing for a while, he had already fallen to 17th. He wasn't in a hurry. This was just the beginning. The Constellation Hall could still be maintained for a while. Only at the end would it be time to truly fight for a ranking. According to the rules of the Constellation Hall, before the end he didn't even need to maintain a high ranking. He only needed to leave his name on the ranking board. Therefore, the number of battles he fought now wouldn't affect his final ranking much. However, every victory would bring him benefits. Naturally, the more battles he fought, the better. After resting for a while, Lu Yi turned around and stepped into a nearby door. As usual, a piece of information appeared in his mind. After a brief investigation, Lu Yi was slightly startled. He had been competing with others for half a month. This time, he finally encountered something different. When his vision recovered, Lu Yi found himself on a desolate planet. The environment wasn't bad, but it was devoid of life. Everything he saw was desolate. There was no one around. He used his divine sense to investigate, but he didn't find any valuable information. However, a lively voice suddenly appeared in his mind. Where is everyone? Let's find a place to gather. End of chapter. Chapter 1407. The competition in the Constellation Palace was not just a form of fighting in the arena. There were many strange scenes, and Lu Yi already knew this. Swish. Cultivators passed through the door and entered the place of competition. What kind of situation they would encounter and what kind of scene they would enter was beyond their control. Everything was operated by the rules of the Constellation Palace. For half a month, Lu Yi had always encountered the form of fighting in the arena, and the opponents he encountered were all alone. But this time was obviously different. This time, it was a competition between many people. As the jumping voice sounded in his mind, Lu Yi could clearly sense the existence of the other 4 people. This was not the perception of spirit sense, nor was it the observation of the naked eye. It was an ability given to him by the Constellation Palace. As long as he was still in this scene, he could easily sense the general location of the 4 people, and at the same time, he could easily establish some contact with them. These 4 people were his temporary companions. Swish. In other words, in this competition, the 5 of them were in the same group. They needed to temporarily join forces and advance and retreat together. This was a test for anyone. It was very difficult for cultivators to cooperate with strangers, because people's hearts were unpredictable and they could not trust each other. But in such a place, in such a scene, the 5 of them had to work together. Because they had enemies, and the enemies were also in a group of 5. As for how many groups there were, Lu Yi did not know. This was not mentioned in the information given by the Constellation Palace when they came in. So on this desolate planet, other than Lu Ye's group of 5, there were at least 5 other people, perhaps 10, 15, or even 20 being here. The most urgent thing for everyone to do was to find a place to gather. Only by gathering could they huddle together for warmth. As the jumping voice sounded, another woman's gentle voice sounded. Then let's find a place to gather? One person does not move, and the other 4 gather. How about that? Without a map, they could not accurately provide the location information. This method was the most practical and best. This was undoubtedly an experience suggestion. If he was not wrong, this woman should have experienced such a competition before. Swish. Another energetic voice rang out. Sure. Then, who should we gather to? Lu Yi didn't say anything. He still spread his spirit sense out and scanned the surroundings. Finally, a slightly old voice sounded. This old man is old, and his legs are inconvenient. Everyone, please show the virtue of respecting the old and loving the young. Come closer to this old man, and be careful along the way. Don't expose your tracks. A lively voice replied, then we'll listen to the old man. The others had no objections, and Lu Yi immediately moved towards the location of the old voice's owner. However, before he approached, he had to determine the specific location of the old voice. Although he could sense the general location of his 4 temporary companions, he had no idea who they corresponded to. However, when one of them did not move and the other 4 moved, it was easy to judge. Soon, Lu Yi sensed that the other 3 temporary companions, including himself, were all gathering in a certain location. That location was undoubtedly the location of the owner of the old voice. A moment later, while Lu Yi was still hurrying along, a shout suddenly rang out in his mind. It was none other than Yang Kai's vigorous voice. Everyone, I was ambushed and injured. I can't get away. Who can help me? How many enemies are there? A woman's weak voice sounded. 2, 1 late stage and 1 middle stage. This late stage is so strong I can't take it. Before he could finish his words, Lu Yi sensed that the person had disappeared without a trace. Clearly he hadn't been killed but had voluntarily admitted defeat and left this place. Lu Yi didn't stop and continued forward with a calm expression. They hadn't even gathered yet and they had already lost one of their members. This was undoubtedly a bad start, but it wasn't a big problem. This wasn't the end. As that person left, the old voice sounding a little helpless. Everyone, this old man has to leave too. I subdued a life beast pet a few days ago, but it suddenly went on a rampage for some reason. This old man has to deal with it. After that, Lu Yi sensed that the old man had disappeared. He immediately stopped in his tracks. They had originally agreed to move toward the old man's location, but now that he had left, there was no need to move forward. The 5 of them had joined forces, but this was just the beginning. One of them was sent flying, and the other left because of his life beast pet. In an instant, they had lost 2 members, leaving only 3. Lu Yi didn't expect to be so unlucky in his first experience of such a situation. The teammates that Constellation Hall had arranged for him were really a little unreliable. The old man was clearly dumbfounded. What do we do now? The woman also let out a long sigh. The sorrow in her sigh could make people feel bitter even from far away. Receiving no response, the old man spoke again. No matter what you do, I'm going to persevere until the end. I can't just admit defeat and leave without even fighting. That's too outrageous. What's your cultivation? The woman asked weakly. Early stage. Oh, then I'm a little stronger than you. I'm at the mid-stage. The woman's voice was still as weak as ever. Speaking of this, she spoke in a straightforward manner without the slightest hint of complacency. Anyone who heard her voice would be able to imagine the image of a woman who was as gentle as water and had a delicate body. Forget about the mid-stage or early stage. What do we do now? Wait, there's still a fellow Taoist who hasn't spoken at all. He can't be a mute, right? Fellow Taoist, do you have any good suggestions? Lu Yi pondered for a moment, then transmitted his voice. Find a hidden place and don't move. We'll come find you. Why don't I move? Are you looking down on me? Are you afraid that I'll be exposed? Let me tell you, although my cultivation isn't high, I have treasures with me. You might not be able to compare to me when it comes to concealing myself. Then don't move, female fellow Taoist. Lu Yi couldn't be bothered to argue with her and immediately changed his mind. The woman was very obedient. Hearing this, she landed and looked around for a hidden place, then hid herself obediently. Lu Yi moved forward peacefully. About half an hour later, he finally arrived at the place where the woman was. This was a desolate mountain valley with traces of concealing arrays. When Lu Yi arrived, the woman obviously sensed him and took the initiative to open a gap in the array. Lu Yi flashed in. At a glance, he saw 2 figures. One was an acquaintance. It was Chu Shen, the young master of the Thousand Sunset sect in Che Ling realm. No wonder his voice sounded a little familiar. He was obviously released. Thinking about it, the opening of the Constellation Hall was such a great opportunity. As a native cultivator of the Wanxiang Galaxy, how could Chu Shen miss it? No matter how reluctant Jiyan Rizhao was, he knew that flowers in a greenhouse would not grow up. The Constellation Hall was undoubtedly a place where people could quickly broaden their horizons and accumulate battle experience. If they missed this opportunity, it would be difficult for them to have such an opportunity again. He said before that he had treasures with him, which Lu Yi believed. He almost fell for this guy's trick back then. Chu Shen was closer to this place, so he naturally arrived earlier than Lu Yi. Standing next to Chu Shen was a woman who looked delicate and weak. She was extremely beautiful, but for some reason she gave people a feeling of pity, as if she had encountered something sad. Lu Yi even saw a look of self-blame in her eyes, but he didn't know what she was blaming herself for. Lu Yi took a few more glances at her, not because she was beautiful, but because of the symmetrical lines on her smooth and delicate cheeks. These lines were obviously natural. Not only did they not ruin her dainty appearance, but they also added a sense of mystery. Sensing the aura on her body, Lu Yi immediately understood that this woman was not from the human race, but the monster race. He just didn't know what her true body was. This was not easy to find out, especially for a monster race woman who had taken human form. The secret of her true body would not be easily revealed, otherwise it would be easy for others to target her. Inside the concealment formation, after Chu Shen confirmed that Lu Ye's cultivation was only at the middle stage constellation realm, he couldn't help but sigh. Unreliable, unreliable. The original lineup of 5 had already lost 2 members. If Lu Yi was at the late-stage constellation realm, he might be able to put up a fight, but now he found that Lu Yi was only at the middle stage, the same cultivation as the woman. 2 middle stage and 1 early stage gathered together. What could they do? Even if he had many treasures, in a battle between cultivators, strength was the foundation. He did have a treasure like the red talisman, but in this kind of battle, he couldn't use the red talisman. However, although Chu Shen was young, there was one good thing about him, and that was that he was indomitable. He quickly collected his emotions and didn't realize that his cultivation was the lowest. He said casually, "Since we're going to fight side by side, we should at least get familiar with each other. Let's exchange our names? It's also convenient for us to address each other." The woman clasped her hands in front of her abdomen, twirling her thumbs, and quickly nodded. Chu Shen coughed lightly and cupped his fists. "Greetings, senior brothers and sisters. I'm called Domineering Side." Lu Ye's expression didn't change. The main thing was that in this half a month, he had seen all kinds of strange names, so he was used to it. He wasn't the only one who used an alias to participate in the Constellation Palace battle. Those cultivators who wanted to make a name for themselves and then be recruited by the major forces would use their real names to do things. This way, it would be easier for them to make a name for themselves. However, there were also many people who didn't want to reveal their real names, or deliberately hid them. Furthermore, the Constellation Palace had a rule of naming themselves at will, so naturally, a large number of strange names emerged. Domineering Side was still considered normal. Lu Yi even saw a guy called Weapon Cultivators eat shit while growing up. In that battle, he beat him up very badly. Lu Yi turned to look at the delicate woman beside him. The woman's voice was as soft as a mosquito. "I'm called Unrivaled Lucky Star." Blushing like blood, Lu Yi nodded slightly. "Fei Wuzuan." The 3 people who used aliases looked at each other, and the atmosphere was silent for a moment. Chapter 1408. Suddenly, Chu Shen seemed to remember something and looked at Lu Yi in shock. "You are F.A. Wuzuan? The F.A. Wuzuan on the chip's ranking?" He must have seen the chip's ranking before coming in. Hearing this, Lucky Star couldn't help but look at Lu Yi. But soon, Chu Shen shook his head. "I must have made a mistake. There is someone with the same name as you on the chip's ranking, and his ranking is very high." The reason for this was because Lu Ye's cultivation was only at the mid-stage of the constellation realm. Of the people who left their names on the chip's ranking, which one wasn't at the late stage? Even if there were mid-stage, there were very few of them. As for early stage, there wasn't even a single one. Having the same name wasn't an exception. Take his domineering name for example. There were so many constellations, so there must be someone with the same name as him. Not to mention the same alias, there were many people who had the same name. In the end, there were too many cultivators participating in the Constellation Palace competition. In Chu Shen's opinion, a mid-stage cultivator definitely wouldn't have the chance to leave his name on the chip's ranking, let alone such a high position. "Let's discuss what to do next." Chu Shen said, "Gentlemen, on my way here, I sense some people fighting. So this time, we will definitely face more than one team. There are at least 2 or even more teams. Right now, our team only has 3 people left. Even if we don't win in the end, we have to at least hold on for a while. It's best if we can eliminate some of our opponents so that we can gain more benefits. In this kind of competition, the number of opponents eliminated and how long they could hold on would directly affect the final chip's ranking and the Mystic Light reward. In addition, there was another rule in this kind of competition. If you hid for a long time and didn't fight, your location would be marked by the Constellation Palace. At that time, you wouldn't be able to hide. This was to prevent people who were proficient in concealment from using their advantage to avoid fighting. If that was the case, then it wouldn't be a fair victory. So, who will be in charge of the 3 of us first? A team needs a backbone after all. Chu Shen continued. This was a reasonable suggestion. If there was a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator here, then the late stage would naturally be in charge. The others wouldn't have any objections. But with 2 mid-stage and 1 early stage, who would be in charge? Lucky Star hurriedly waved his hand. "I'll listen to you." This woman didn't seem to have a mind of her own. Chu Shen looked at Lu Yi and recommended himself. Dao brother, is there a problem if I make the decision? TSK, don't look at how my cultivation is lower than yours by a level, but I have many treasures. If we're really talking about strength, an average mid-stage constellation realm cultivator might not be able to defeat me. These words were a little too modest. Lu Yi had tried out his methods before, and knew that the average mid-stage constellation realm cultivator would definitely not be his match. Other things aside, just the mystic light from that mirror alone was impossible to guard against. Of course, if you have any suggestions, we can discuss them as soon as possible. Chu Shen's attitude was very sincere. Lu Yi was about to respond when he suddenly sensed something and quickly shouted, "Enemy attack!" As soon as he finished speaking, there was a violent fluctuation of spiritual energy, and the earth shook. Then, a fierce aura descended from the sky. The array formation here was set up by the lucky star. Although it had some protective effects, it was not very strong. It was mainly used for concealment. He didn't know why he was so unlucky to be discovered and immediately attacked. The instant the array formation collapsed, two auras imprinted into Lu Ye's perception. One was shockingly mid-stage and the other late-stage. These two were undoubtedly in the same group. There was a high probability that they were also on the way to meet up with their own people. When they passed by this place, they sensed some clues and brazenly attacked. Because at this time, everyone was looking for their companions to meet up. They concluded that this was a gathering point. The cultivators of a certain group had not gathered yet, and with their methods, they might be able to obtain some benefits through a sudden sneak attack. In reality, their deduction was not wrong. If it was really just two ordinary mid-stage and one early stage gathered here, encountering the two of them would probably point to disaster. But among the three people gathered here, which one of them was simple? Chu Shen's cultivation was indeed low, but his status was high. Lu Ye's cultivation was not high, but his battle prowess was valiant. Even the invincible Lucky Star, whose true identity was unknown, might not necessarily be a simple constellation realm cultivator. Lu Ye's figure had already dashed out, but Chu Shen took out a defensive spiritual treasure, enveloping himself and the Lucky Star. He was prepared to see the situation clearly before making a decision. Suddenly ambushed, his response was undoubtedly very wise. Because he did not know how many enemies there were and what their cultivations were, it also showed his extremely fast reaction speed. However, just as he probed the enemy's situation, violent spiritual power fluctuations erupted in his perception. In the next instant, his vision was filled with an overwhelming number of colorful spirit techniques. Surprisingly, Lu Yi had made a move. The two constellations who launched the sneak attack did not expect the enemy to be so bold. Just now, when they noticed the cultivation of Lu Ye's group, they were full of joy, thinking that they had pinched a soft persimmon. They did not expect that Lu Yi, a mid-stage constellation realm cultivator, not only did not show any signs of escaping, but also counterattacked. Looking at the scale and number of spirit techniques, they were both shocked. Because being able to activate so many spirit techniques in a short period of time was not an ability that a mid-stage constellation realm cultivator could possess. Moreover, they could clearly sense that the power of each spirit technique was extremely high. The two of them made a prompt decision and separated. The sky full of spirit techniques blasted out, and the two figures dashed out in a sorry state. Their auras were turbulent, and they had undoubtedly suffered a loss. Chu Shen, who was activating his defensive spiritual treasure, saw this scene and his eyes could not help but light up. When they were suddenly attacked, he thought that this time it boded ill rather than well, but with Lu Ye's counterattack, he clearly sensed Fa Wuzuan's powerful background and suddenly came back to his senses. This battle was not impossible. Raising his hand, he summoned his body-solidifying mirror and urged his spiritual power inside. At the same time, Lucky Star, who was standing next to him, changed her delicate appearance. As her spiritual power surged, her fingernails grew rapidly. In an instant, the 10 fingernails on her two hands were half a foot long and shone with a cold light. At first glance, it was as if she had 2 sharp claws in her hands. Her figure swayed, and she had already pounced out, like a fierce beast hunting for food. However, she also knew her own limits, so she did not look for the late-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator, but went for the mid-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator. The two figures fought in an instant, and directly stunned Chu Shun, who was activating the mirror's power, because from the beginning, the lucky star gave off a weak feeling, as if she would be blown away by the wind. However, when she really made a move, he realized the ferocity of her fighting style. It was a fighting style that completely disregarded her life. Facing the enemy's attack, she had no intention of dodging at all. It was completely a posture of exchanging life for life. The opponent she found was a weapon cultivator, and the two of them fought in close combat. The battle was extremely fierce, and when her sharp claws collided with the opponent's spiritual treasure, sparks flew everywhere. What made Chu Shun even more dumbfounded was that Lu Yi, who had used a lot of spells to catch the enemy off guard, was now bombarding the other late-stage enemy with spells in an endless stream. The other late-stage enemy was only able to parry and barely had the strength to fight back. In this short period of time, the power of the body solidification mirror in Chu Shun's hand had already been activated, but he did not know which one to attack. Originally, he had planned to attack the late-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator. After all, the latter's cultivation was higher. As long as he dealt with the late-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator, the three of them would have nothing to fear from the remaining mid-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator. However, at this moment, the late-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator was in an extremely difficult situation, and it seemed that they did not need his help at all. On the other hand, although the lucky star temporarily gained the upper hand by relying on her reckless fighting style, it might not be able to last long. Moreover, this kind of fighting style could easily put him in danger. With a thought, Chu Shun made a decision. The body solidification mirror's light shot out, instantly enveloping the mid-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator. This person was entangled with the lucky star, and had been constantly on guard against Chu Shun's movements. For cultivators with rich battle experience, this kind of treasure with unknown power was the most difficult to guard against. It was only when the treasure's light bloomed that he roughly realized the treasure's effect. He instinctively wanted to dodge, but could not get away at all. In a hurry, he twisted his body, and the treasure's light only covered half of his body. Even so, the mid-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator's body suddenly stiffened. The body solidification mirror's effect, as its name implied, was to freeze a person's body. The essence of that light was actually a kind of invisible field. Once it entered a person's body, it could make a person's body stiffen. Lu Yi had the innate skill tree to burn and refine, so she did not fear this treasure's light. However, the others could not. Even if only half of his body was covered, this person's movements could not be coherent. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the lucky star's sharp claws flashed. It did not know what kind of secret technique it used, but it first broke through this person's protective spiritual energy with one claw, and then pierced through his chest with the other claw. This mid-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator had a pained expression. Although he was unwilling, he still blurted out, "I admit defeat. Spare me." If he did not admit defeat now, he would die. According to the rules of the Constellation Palace battle, if one took the initiative to admit defeat, they would only leave after a breath. A breath's time was not long, but it was enough for a Constellation Realm Cultivator to take a person's life. In other words, if the lucky star wanted to, she could completely kill this person. However, this woman was undoubtedly not a bloodthirsty person. After hearing the words "admit defeat," the sharp claws that were about to attack again stopped. She pulled her other claw out of the opponent's chest, and with a burst of blood, she floated back. After a breath, this mid-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator's figure suddenly disappeared. The injury was not light, but it was not fatal. For a mid-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator, it could be recovered in a day or two. After dealing with this mid-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator, Chu Shun hurriedly looked towards the late-stage Constellation Realm Cultivator. He once again urged his spiritual energy to pour into the body solidification mirror, ready to lend Lu Yi a hand. However, what shocked him was that Lu Yi did not show any signs of attacking again. The light of the spell slowly faded, and the late-stage constellation Realm Cultivator's figure had long disappeared without a trace. This late-stage constellation Realm Cultivator was actually killed by Fa Wuxia alone. And it only took a very short time. One had to know that he had joined forces with the Lucky Star, and relied on the power of the body solidification mirror to achieve such a quick result. The opponent was only a mid-stage constellation Realm Cultivator. In comparison, this Fa Wuxia's strength was somewhat terrifying. End of chapter. Chapter 1409. After a single battle, the two attackers were both eliminated. The two probably didn't expect such a situation, otherwise, they wouldn't have acted so rashly. Chu Xin and Unrivaled Lucky Star didn't say anything, only looking at Lu Yi. Lu Ye's hands were clasped in his wide sleeves. After a moment of silence, he said, "What were we discussing just now?" Chu Xin immediately said, "The discussion was for you to make the decision. I have no problem with it, I will follow your lead. What about you?" He turned to look at Lucky Star. The woman returned to her weak appearance from before. Her long fingernails that were comparable to top-grade spirit treasures were also retracted. She said softly, "I have no problem with it, either of you can make the decision." Chu Xin nodded. "Then it's settled. Brother, just tell us what to do, we will listen to you." Lu Yi said, "You can listen to me, but I hope that the two of you will have a certain degree of trust in me, because no matter what, we will have to work together from now on." "Of course." Chu Xin agreed readily, but no one knew what he was thinking. Lu Yi also knew that it was impossible for everyone to completely trust each other in such a situation. Even if they were on the same team, this was still a temporary cooperation under the rules of Constellation Hall. He pondered for a moment, then continued, "The rules of this battle aren't about who can last until the end, who will gain the most benefits. The biggest deciding factor is the number of enemies eliminated, and the time you can last is only a secondary factor. So even if we can hide until the end, if we can't eliminate enough enemies, we won't gain much. My intention is to take the initiative and eliminate as many enemies as possible. Of course, with the strength of the three of us, if there aren't many enemies, we can definitely fight. But if it's a complete team of 5, it will be difficult to deal with them, and there might even be some risks." As he said this, he took out the newly refined Twin Spirit Connecting Array Disc. "I have a treasure here that can be used here. You can familiarize yourself with it." As he spoke, he activated the power of the Twin Chi Linked Branch Array Disc. In fact, if he wanted to use the Twin Spirit Connection, he didn't need the disc array at all. The original intention of refining the disc array was to make it convenient for others to use. He could casually construct the Twin Spirit Connection, and the effect was almost the same as the disc array. It just needed to be maintained at all times. Lu Yi naturally had his own considerations for taking out the array disc at such a time. As for whether it could proceed smoothly or not, that would depend on the progress of the situation. The instant the formation disc's might was released and enveloped the three of them, Chu Shen and Lucky Star's expressions turned stern. This was because under the envelopment of the formation disc's might, the two of them could roughly sense the powerful foundation in Lu Ye's body. If the power hidden in the body of a typical mid-stage constellation realm cultivator was like a candle flame, then the power in Lu Ye's body was like a bright lamp. What was even more inconceivable to the two of them was that they could clearly sense that the three of them, who had just met each other for the first time, were easily connected to each other under the cover of that inexplicable power. There was not much resistance or disharmony at all. Both of them were greatly shaken, far more so than when they felt Lu Ye's powerful foundation. This was because the power of this treasure was something they had never seen before. It should be known that if the chi dynamics between cultivators could be closely connected, they would be able to smoothly form a formation. Once a formation was formed, they would be able to display abilities that surpassed their own strength. However, it was not easy to form a formation. It required familiar companions and a long period of practice and running in. Connecting with a stranger's chi dynamics for the first time was complete nonsense. Your chi dynamics were cold, and my chi dynamics were gentle. They clashed with each other, so how could they blend and connect with each other? Of course, It could be done with the help of formation talismans. However, formation talismans were precious and consumable treasures. Who would casually use them unless it was a last resort? However, this disc array was clearly not a consumable treasure. It could definitely be used repeatedly. This also meant that this disc array was equivalent to many formation talismans. In comparison, the effect of allowing each other to borrow strength seemed insignificant. The biggest reason why Lu Yi refined this disc array was because it could allow cultivators to connect with their qi dynamics and form a formation at will. Borrowing strength from each other was just another side effect of the disc array. All constellation cultivators had good eyesight. Even the seemingly weak and powerless Lucky Star could see the greatest mystery of the disc array at a glance, let alone someone like Chu Shen who had an extraordinary background. He was young, but he had a sunshine powerhouse as his birth mother. He had seen many treasures and immediately realized the great value of this disc array. He held back for a moment, but couldn't help but ask, "Brother, this thing, what is it called?" Lu Yi looked at him meaningfully. The Twin Qi and Branches Array Disc. Twin Qi linked branches. Chu Shen savored it carefully and exclaimed, "Good name, very suitable for the occasion." With the help of this disc array, even if the three of them were to form a formation, they would still have the strength to fight even if they encountered a complete five-man team. Lu Ye's method of dealing with a late-stage constellation cultivator so quickly proved this point. He also finally understood why Fa Wuzuan suggested to take the initiative to attack. With the help of this disc array, it would be a waste if they only hid. After the discussion, the three of them soared into the sky and formed a simple tripartite formation, each occupying the three positions of heaven, earth, and human. Their auras were brilliant, and they were ostentatious. Since they were taking the initiative to attack, there was naturally no need to hide. They would do it as conspicuously as possible. They weren't afraid of being ambushed, they were only afraid that the enemy wouldn't show up. Lu Yi was the leader, while Chu Shen and Lucky Star were his assistants. In the cultivation world, the strong were respected. This was a deeply ingrained belief. Although Chu Shen admitted that he was not bad, compared to Fa Wuzuan who was at the top of the ranking, there was still a big gap. Low cultivation was after all a shortcoming. In just half an hour, Lu Yi felt the movement of a battle in the distance. According to the information he had, there were at least 3 teams fighting this time. As for whether there were more, he didn't know for now. Although this desolate star was big, it wasn't very big compared to the constellation cultivators. With so many constellation cultivators gathered here, it was inevitable that they would meet, clash, and clash. Since there was a battle, it meant that there were at least 2 teams of cultivators fighting. After a while, as the distance narrowed, Lu Yi saw the situation clearly. It was indeed 2 teams of cultivators fighting, and it was 2 complete teams with a total of 10 people. This meant that there was at least another team on the desolate star. Because the 3 of them had defeated 2 constellation cultivators before, one of the teams had lost 2 people. The battle ahead was very intense, back and forth. The rules of the constellation hall didn't have any obvious explanation, but there were many hidden rules. The biggest feature was relative fairness. In other words, no matter what kind of battle it was, under the operation of the constellation hall's rules, the strength of each side was roughly the same. Take Lu Ye's previous arena battles as an example. At first, he encountered intermediate stage cultivators, but later, the probability of encountering advanced stage cultivators increased. Because he won every battle, although he only had intermediate stage cultivation, the Constellation Hall had already determined that he had the strength of an advanced stage cultivator. They would do their best to arrange advanced stage cultivators as his opponents. Of course, this kind of fairness was only relative. The Constellation Hall couldn't do it perfectly. This kind of fairness was also reflected in the allocation of personnel. For example, the 2 teams fighting at the moment both had body cultivators charging at the front, weapon cultivators assisting in killing the enemy, sword cultivators flying swords like rain, ghost cultivators appearing and disappearing, and Dharma cultivators roaming and casting spells. It could be said that the collision between these 2 complete teams was an extremely standard team cooperation. Each had their own position, and there was a certain degree of cooperation. If Lu Ye's team wasn't missing 2 people, it would definitely be a good team and wouldn't be said to be a misshapen configuration. This kind of battle looked intense, but it was very difficult to achieve anything unless one side took an unconventional move. This was probably the reason why the 2 teams fought in full swing without any losses. Their allocation was similar, and their strength was similar. Naturally, they were evenly matched. The 2 sides fought for an unknown amount of time. When Lu Yi and the other 2's auras entered the vicinity of the battlefield, they were immediately detected by these people. The cultivators of both teams slowed down their movements at the same time and looked over vigilantly. In the cultivation world, it was not uncommon for a sandpiper and clam to fight, and the fishermen would benefit from the fishermen's quarrel. The 2 sides were in an abyss of suffering, so naturally, they had to be on guard against such a thing. However, when they realized that there were only 3 people coming, and that 2 of them were in the middle stage and 1 was in the early stage, they didn't care much. Each of them had a late-stage overseer, and all 5 of them were full. No one was afraid of such a disabled team. They naturally thought that the other party was just here to watch the show. However, what shocked all of them was that this team of 3, who had obviously been beaten to a pulp and didn't have much strength, didn't have any intention of stopping. Just like that, they charged straight towards the most intense part of the battlefield. Before they arrived, an overwhelming number of spells had already swept over. The cultivators of both sides were furious. Someone shouted, "How dare you!" This scene was like 2 lions fighting, but suddenly, a rabbit ran in and peed. The lethality wasn't much, but it was extremely insulting. However, an extremely shocking scene appeared. As the violent spells enveloped them, a mid-stage constellation realm cultivator who was the focus of attention actually screamed in pain. The protective spiritual light around him shattered, and blood splattered everywhere as he fell into the air. This guy held on to his last breath and shouted that he admitted defeat. Before he landed, he disappeared. Both sides widened their eyes. Only then did they realize that this pool of urine was very insulting, but its lethality was also not bad. Taking out a mid-stage constellation realm cultivator in one move, this strength was extraordinary. The 2 sides had been fighting here for a long time, and they were evenly matched. There hadn't been any casualties. This disabled team that had inexplicably barged in and killed one of them. What was this? Chapter 1410. Following the elimination of the mid-stage constellation cultivator targeted by Lu Yi, the remaining 9 people from both teams realized one thing. This disabled team that had suddenly barged in wasn't just here to watch the show. They were here to cause trouble, and their strength was quite impressive. Lu Ye's technique was unleashed once more, this time targeting another mid-stage constellation realm cultivator. Learning from his predecessor's mistakes, this person wanted to dodge, but he was still a step too late. He hastily blocked a few techniques and was already out of strength. Just as he was about to follow in his companion's footsteps, a burly figure brazenly rushed in front of him. The chi and blood in his body surged, and a layer of blood-colored shadow swelled up beside this burly figure, turning into a solid defense. It was the body cultivator of this team who had come to protect him. Many spells bombarded, causing the blood-colored shadow to sway. The body cultivator was stunned. He had seen someone being eliminated just now, so he knew that the opponent was not weak. Only now did he personally experience the strength of Fang Minglai's enemy. If not for the fact that he was a body cultivator and had a strong defense, other people might not have been able to block it. The one who used the spell was clearly only a mid-stage constellation cultivator. What made him even more stunned was that the 3 members of the disabled team did not have any intention of changing directions and just directly crashed into him. The body cultivator was so angry that he laughed. The leader of the disabled team was obviously a spell cultivator. Since he was a spell cultivator, he should be able to use spells from a distance. At this moment, he had the intention of closing in on him. He was underestimating him too much. The body cultivator was not the only one who realized Lu Ye's intention. Chu Shen and Lucky Star, who were connected to him, also realized it. When he saw Lu Yi eliminate one person in one move, Chu Shen was secretly excited. He felt that the powerhouses at the top of the rankings were indeed worthy of their reputation. He had hugged a very thick thigh this time and was willing to be its leg hair. But now, Lu Yi was charging towards the body cultivator with a determined expression and full of vigor. Chu Shen's heart could not help but beat wildly. Yet, the body cultivator was a late-stage constellation cultivator. Like the body cultivator, he could not understand what Lu Yi was trying to do. Would there be a good end to barging into someone else's battle like this? He even had the urge to leave the formation to avoid suffering with Lu Yi. But in the next moment, he gritted his teeth and followed closely behind Lu Yi. He remembered Fa Wuzuan's previous warning that he and Lucky Star had to have a certain degree of trust in him. Therefore, he concluded that a person who could rank within the top 20 on the leaderboard with his mid-stage cultivation could not be a brainless person. He must have his reasons for doing so. Of course, the biggest reason why he made this decision was because he had a life-saving treasure. Under the rules of the Constellation Hall, he was confident that his life would not be in any danger. Since there was no danger to his life, it seemed that there was nothing wrong with going crazy. Just as he made up his mind, his expression froze. This was because he saw that Fa Wuzuan in front of him had a pitch-black saber in his hand. What followed was an earth-shaking collision. Violent spiritual energy swept out in all directions, accompanied by an angry roar and a muffled groan. Chu Shen clearly felt that the formation of the three people on his side was slightly obstructed for a moment, and then it suddenly became unobstructed. Under the influence of qi, he followed closely behind Lu Yi and swept past the body cultivator blocking the way. Out of the corner of his vision, he caught a glimpse of the blooming of blood, and a clear smell of blood lingered at the tip of his nose. His expression was a little confused because if he wasn't mistaken just now, he seemed to have seen something incredible. When he hurriedly turned his head to take a look, he indeed saw an unbelievable scene. The burly body cultivator who had blocked his way was now holding his neck and falling down diagonally. Between his fingers, blood was gushing out like a tide. More than half of his neck had been cut off. The bright red color of blood made Chu Shen's pupils suddenly shrink. Such a terrible injury was almost a fatal blow. It should be known that the body cultivator was known for his rough skin and thick flesh. He even suspected that Fa Wuzuan had deliberately held back. Otherwise, the injury could not have been so subtle. It was not enough to take the person's life, but it was enough to make the person lose the ability to fight. Thinking about it this way, Fa Wuzuan's true strength was stronger than he had expected. Next, he saw numerous magic techniques and overwhelming sword beams sweeping towards them from all directions. Shockingly, the cultivators from the two teams that were fighting each other earlier were attacking them. The two teams that were fighting fiercely, because of the strong addition of a third party, instantly buried the hatchet. Although it was not to the extent of joining forces to fight the enemy, they were still fighting together. Especially the team that had lost a body cultivator, their attacks were especially fierce. Chu Shen let out a strange cry and immediately summoned a defensive spiritual artifact to protect the three of them. He did not have many other things in his hands, but defensive spiritual treasures were the most abundant. It was all thanks to his mother. Many attacks came, and Lu Ye's figure moved, dodging some of them. Some were blocked by Chu Shen's defensive spiritual treasure, and some were blocked by Lucky Star's means. This round of attacks was dazzling, but it did not hurt the three of them at all. Chu Shen was excited because he realized that under the effect of the twin qi-linked branches array disk, the power of his spiritual treasure was much greater than usual, and it could provide a stronger defense. This was something to be expected. After all, he was in the early stage of the constellation realm. No matter how good a spiritual treasure was in his hands, its power would be reduced. However, under the premise that he could borrow power, he could use the spiritual treasure's power as much as possible. In his excitement, he blurted out, "Dao brother, leave the defense to us. You just need to focus on hacking and hacking." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Yi slashed out with his saber again. This time, the saber seemed to strike empty air, but as the saber fell, a cry of surprise rang out. A ghostly figure suddenly appeared, as if it had slammed into the saber itself. This person was holding a short blade in his hand. The short blade flickered like a snake's tongue, and he was about to attack Lucky Star from the side. This was obviously a ghost cultivator. Blood flew out again, and this ghost cultivator's body was sent flying like a ragged sack. Lu Yi did not stop moving. He changed directions and faced the chaotic attacks coming from the front and the side. He fixed his eyes on a sword cultivator who was controlling a flying sword. Seeing this, how could the sword cultivator dare to face him head-on? It had only been 10 breaths since the appearance of this disabled team, but in these 10 breaths, 3 people had already been killed, and one of them was a late-stage body cultivator. Sword light burst out around him, and he flashed to the side. He wanted to meet up with his companions and avoid Lu Ye's attack. At the same time, the rain of swords fell like a waterfall. Lu Yi did not care and charged forward. The rain of swords was blocked by Chu Shen's spiritual treasure and Lucky Star. Occasionally, a fish escaped the net, but he could use Holy Guard to block it. With a raise of his hand, the deity's striking whip lashed out. The long whip condensed from pure spiritual power lashed at the sword cultivator, causing him to stagger. Just as he steadied himself, he realized in despair that Lu Yi was already in front of him. "Save me!" The sword cultivator shouted. Not far away, his companions hurried over, but they were still a step too late. As the long sword slashed down, the sword light was like snow. The sword cultivator's protective spiritual light was broken, and blood spurted out from his body. He was seriously injured in an instant. Lu Yi did not kill him. Instead, he turned the blade and slashed at the cultivator who had just rushed over. That cultivator's face was pale. He only hated himself for being so impulsive and running so fast. When Lu Yi finished off this cultivator, he looked up and saw that there was no one around. With the addition of Chu Shen and Lucky Star, there were only 5 people left in the 2 groups of 10 people who had been fighting fiercely. Moreover, the 5 of them were not in the same group. Seeing that the enemy was so fierce, who dared to stay? They all scattered like birds and beasts, using their methods to escape in all directions. They wanted to escape from this place first and then make plans later. However, how could Lu Yi let them escape? For him, it was not difficult to deal with these enemies. The difficult part was finding their traces. If they escaped now, it would be troublesome to find them. As a speck of blood light bloomed, the sound of a roaring river could be heard, like the angry waves of the sea. The blood light suddenly spread out, enveloping the surroundings and turning into a thick sea of blood. All this time, Lu Yi had tried his best to avoid using the blood sea technique in front of others. Even if he did use it, he would try to kill them all. This was because the more tricks he had up his sleeves, the more likely he would be able to catch his enemies off guard. But what did Fa Wuzuan's blood sea technique have to do with Lu Yi? None of the 5 people escaped the range of the sea of blood. However, the 5 of them were all experienced in battle. They knew that this secret technique originated from the Blood Clan had a huge drawback, which was that it consumed a lot of the cultivator's spiritual energy. Therefore, the moment they were enveloped by the sea of blood, they used all their methods and attacked wildly in all directions. This method was undoubtedly very wise. It could not only prevent a sneak attack, but also increase the consumption of the enemy who used this technique. The 5 of them believed that it would not take long for the sea of blood to collapse. The premise was that they could hold on until then. However, Lu Yi would not give them this chance. If he was alone and used this method to trap the 5 constellation mansions, it would take some effort to get rid of them. Perhaps they would really succeed. However, he was not alone at this moment. Under the cover of the sea of blood, Lu Yi knew their positions clearly. He led Chu Shen and Lucky Star through the sea of blood, easily finding the enemy's position and getting rid of them one by one. After a while, the sea of blood disappeared. Lu Yi and the other 2 stood in the air, their bodies spotless. There were also several figures with weak auras and complicated expressions. Without exception, all of them were seriously injured. The body cultivator who was first killed by Lu Yi was also there. Half of his neck was cut open. Although he had not lost his ability to fight, he did not fight after that. because he could feel that he was still alive because Lu Yi had held back. Lu Yi was a righteous person, and he was not one to pester endlessly. He took a deep look at Lu Yi and cupped his fists. "I've learned." With that, he disappeared. Obviously, he had returned to the Constellation Hall to treat his injuries. "Thank you for showing mercy, fellow Taoist." Another person spoke. It was the sword cultivator who had shouted for help earlier. The remaining people expressed their thanks and left the place. In an instant, the originally chaotic battlefield became clear. End of chapter. Chapter 14:11. The two teams of 10 people left the arena. Lu Yi and the other two maintained their auras, maintaining their formation. He had already put away his Panshan saber and was wearing a loose robe with large sleeves. Anyone who saw him would praise him as a good spell cultivator. However, who would have thought that it was this guy in standard spell cultivator attire who had just cut down 2 full squads like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves? Chu Shen laughed heartily. "Awesome, this is awesome." In his entire life, he had never fought such a hearty battle. He did not have to worry too much about the whole process. He only had to activate the power of the defensive spiritual treasure. Then he saw one enemy after another die under his blade. In the past, when he fought with others, he mostly relied on the power of his treasure, but Fa Wuzuan relied on his own abilities. That long blade was black and long, and that slash was fast and sharp. It was truly fascinating. He could not help but wonder when he could be as invincible as Fa Wuzuan. If that happened, he would have no regrets even if he died. If it was said that Lu Ye's ability to deal with a late-stage constellation cultivator so easily at the assembly point had shocked him, then this battle had truly opened his eyes. Such a scene was not something that could be seen casually. His background was indeed extraordinary, but it was precisely because of his extraordinary background that he received more protection and care. On the contrary, he had lost some things, and could not experience things that ordinary cultivators could experience. He could not help but sigh. The strong cultivators who were ranked at the top of the leaderboard were indeed terrifying. Fa Wuzuan did not look special, but he was practically a monster. He just did not know how powerful those who were ranked higher than him were. However, he also clearly realized one thing, and that was that Fa Wuzuan was not a good person. He had such a name, dressed as a spell cultivator, and could use spells. It was obvious that he wanted to mislead others. If they really treated him as a spell cultivator, anyone who faced him would be at a disadvantage. Chu Shen felt that he had learned something. If there was another chance like this in the future, he would have to come up with a better name. What domineering side? It was really too low-end, and he would be easily beaten up after feeling happy for a while. Chu Shen said, "Boss, what do we do next?" After the battle just now, Chu Shen was completely convinced. He even changed the way he addressed Lu Yi, revealing a sense of respect and worship. Young people were like this, especially young people like Chu Shen who had been strictly disciplined. It was very easy for them to be attracted by the strong. If this expert was about the same age as him, then he would be even more convinced. Find someone. Lu Ye's words were concise and comprehensive. 2 complete teams had been eliminated, which meant that this battle was not over yet. This meant that there were still other enemies on the field. Moreover, based on their previous encounters, there were indeed at least 4 teams participating this time. Then what he had to do was very simple. He had to find them and kill them. Furthermore, that team was very likely to be the same as theirs, a disabled team. So far, things had been going smoothly. Just now, when he led Chu Shen and Lucky Star to attack together, Lu Yi was already mentally prepared for the 2 of them to retreat first if the situation turned bad. After all, they had only met by chance and had only joined forces for a short period of time. It was impossible for them to trust each other too much. Besides, no one knew what kind of ability the other had. If it were other experienced cultivators, it was very likely that they would have taken the initiative to leave the formation. However, Chu Shen and Lucky Star did not. Instead, they followed behind him without hesitation and maintained the formation to advance. It could be said that they were simple-minded, but it could also be said that they were hopeful. Of course, There was also the factor of Lu Yi quickly defeating a late-stage constellation realm cultivator, which allowed them to roughly see Lu Ye's strength. All in all, being young had its advantages. Perhaps being more naive and trusting of others was not necessarily a bad thing. If Chu Shen and Lucky Star had left the formation just now, it would not have been easy for Lu Yi to defeat 10 people so quickly by himself. He could only fight in a roundabout way and find opportunities to launch sneak attacks one by one. It would have been impossible for him to charge forward like this. With Chu Shen and Lucky Star's protection, he could concentrate all his strength on attacking. Therefore, although the enemies were all eliminated by him, the ones who contributed were 3 people. For the next 2 hours, the 3 of them were on the road to find the remaining enemies. Unfortunately, their luck did not seem to be good and they did not find any. Previously, they were able to find those people mainly because they were fighting in full swing, and there were fluctuations of spiritual power, which made it easy for others to detect. However, now there were most likely only 2 disabled teams left on the entire desolate planet. If they did not meet each other, it would be very difficult for them to meet. It was not until 2 hours later that Lu Yi and the other 2 suddenly sensed the location of the disabled team. It was not their own ability, but because the 2 teams had not fought for too long, which triggered the rules of the Constellation Hall. Under the operation of the Constellation Hall's rules, they could roughly detect the enemy's location. Of course, this kind of detection was mutual. At the same time that they detected the enemy's location, the enemy obviously also detected them. The enemy was probably also looking for them. Therefore, the 2 disabled teams changed directions and moved closer to each other. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they finally met. As expected, the other team only had 3 people left. Moreover, their cultivation was the same as theirs. 2 of them were in the mid-stage and 1 was in the early stage. Looking at it this way, the 2 cultivators that Lu Yi and the other 2 killed at the meeting point were from this team. These 3 people had not encountered any enemies since they came in, so they were in a state of idleness and were very anxious. Now that they finally saw people, and their cultivation was not high, they all rushed over as if they had been injected with chicken blood. These 3 people also formed a simple human formation, but it was only a simple cooperation, without the help of a formation. Their thinking was very simple now. No matter how strong the enemy was, they would fight first. Even if they were eliminated, it was better than wandering around here. Moreover, everyone's cultivation was the same, and the number of people was the same. It was hard to say who would be eliminated. Then, the 3 people crashed into Lu Ye's spell storm. Chu Shen also roared, urging his spirit artifact to display its power. After a while, the spiritual power fluctuations subsided. The 3 people who rushed over had disappeared, and there were still traces of blood on the ground. Mysterious light fell from the sky, each enveloping the 3 people. The mysterious light fell from the sky, which meant that this battle was over. There were indeed only 4 teams involved, and no more. Chu Shen and Lucky Star were overjoyed because the rewards they received this time were undoubtedly much more generous than what they had received before. Lu Yi also noticed it. The 3 people gathered together, and it was not easy to refine, so they naturally had to separate and find a secluded place. Separation was imminent, and Chu Shen was a little reluctant. "Boss, leave a note imprint. If there is anything good in the future, just take care of me, hee." Lu Yi took out his note and handed it to him, then took the note he handed over and left their imprints. "I want one too." Lucky Star's soft voice sounded, as if he was a little embarrassed. Lu Yi naturally did not refuse. After a while, Chu Shen and Lucky Star left, no doubt to find a place to refine the mysterious light. Lu Yi urged the power of his talent tree, and after refining for a while, he swallowed the pure energy contained in the mysterious light. He silently estimated that refining the mysterious light this time was almost equivalent to refining nearly 300 spirit jades. Looking at it this way, the number of chips he could accumulate would not be small. As for how much it increased, he did not know for the time being. He would have to return to the Constellation Hall and interact with the ranking to know. Leaving this place, he appeared in Hall 763 and slightly sensed the ranking. Compared to before, Lu Yi found that his chips had increased by a total of 20 points. The harvest was not small, 20 points. If it was the arena battle, he would have to fight 20 matches and eliminate 20 people to get it. This could be said to be the result of a day's battle. But in the battle just now, the number of people he eliminated was obviously less than 20, and those eliminations were not his alone, but shared with Chu Shen and Lucky Star. Looking at it this way, if he obtained victory in this competition, the benefits he obtained were much greater than the arena battle, whether it was the mysterious light reward or the chips he accumulated. Unfortunately, in the Constellation Hall competition, cultivators did not have the right to choose. Whatever the Constellation Hall arranged, the cultivators had to follow. Not in a hurry to set off again, Lu Yi turned and walked towards a direction. In that direction, there was a huge door standing. This door was not the same as the other doors, it was obviously bigger. If cultivators went through the other doors, they would enter the competition grounds and participate in various forms of competition. But if they went through this door, they would enter other numbered halls. As for which hall they would enter, if they did not choose it, it would be randomly arranged. If they chose it, they could enter the hall they wanted to go to. Lu Yi wanted to go to Hall 88. He had long heard that this hall had become a hall for cultivators to trade. There were countless stalls inside, but Lu Yi had never been there, mainly because there was nothing to buy or sell. But it was different now, he needed to buy something, and in large quantities. Fortunately, he had kept the reward he received when he brought Chu Shen back to the Che Lingjia. Otherwise he would not have the capital to do so. His figure passed through the door and he shouted 88, his vision blurred, and he appeared in another hall. Looking up, there was indeed a large number on the dome, 88, 3 simple and unadorned characters. Immediately he heard a loud noise. Looking up, Lu Yi frowned slightly, because there were too many people here. Normally, a hall could accommodate 2,000 people, and it would be considered quite rich. It was not that it could only accommodate 2,000 people, but that cultivators needed more space to move, so as long as there were 2,000 people in a hall, more cultivators would come in, and they would enter other halls. But the number of people in Hall 88 was clearly more than 2,000, it was possible to say that there were 20,000 people. Although the hall was spacious, with more than 20,000 people gathered here, it was naturally not peaceful, especially when the cultivators coming and going were all doing business. You buy and sell, you talk, you communicate with your spiritual sense, and so on. This chapter ends. Chapter 14:12. Although there was no one in charge in the main hall, all the people who set up stalls to do business here silently followed the rules, so although there were many stalls, they were still neat and orderly. There were about 1,000 stalls crisscrossing each other. In front of each stall, cultivators weaved in and out. To be able to own a stall in this main hall, one had to at least have a background in a large domain. It was not that people were not allowed to set up stalls here, but there was a limit to the number of people who set up stalls, so they had long been bought by those with more capital. Lu Yi had heard of such a thing before. It was said that when the Constellation Hall first opened, there were people who came to the 88th main hall and occupied many stalls, specifically waiting for others to buy them, making a fortune. There was no doubt that these people were well informed because when the Constellation Hall opened in the past, the 88th main hall was also used as a place for trading, so some people knew that the stalls here were precious. When Lu Yi heard of this news, it was already too late, otherwise he could also get some soup. There were big and small stalls, but no matter how big a stall was, there were many types of goods sold and in large quantities, so it was naturally impossible to display all of them, so most of the stall owners only displayed things that were more precious, and other goods were not displayed. They only made a jade slip list of the goods and placed it in front of the stall for the passing cultivators to check, and if there was a need, they could discuss with the stall owner. Lu Yi casually strolled around for a while, and found that the most common thing to buy and sell here was all kinds of spirit pills, healing pills, recovery pills, everything. This was normal in the battles in the Constellation Hall. Injuries were common, and injuries naturally had to be treated, and healing pills had to be used to treat injuries. Recovery pills followed the same principle. Although the winner of the battle would be rewarded with mystic light and could easily recover, there were winners and losers, and those who lost the battle did not have the chance to be rewarded with mystic light, They could only rely on themselves to recover. Almost every stall had spirit pills for sale. Lu Yi wanted to buy a lot of things, but they were not precious. He originally thought that he could easily buy them here. Who would have thought that many stalls did not sell them? On second thought, he realized that it was precisely because the things he wanted to buy were not precious that they were hard to find here. Because the goods here were all brought in by cultivators from outside, they would naturally pick those that were easy to sell and expensive to bring in. On the other hand, if it was cheap and not really needed by the Constellation Hall, they would not waste the effort to bring it in. Although it was difficult to find, Lu Yi eventually found it. The quantity of goods was not large, but Lu Yi did not mind. After negotiating with the stall owner, he easily bought it. He continued to shop, wanting to buy more. After spending most of the day, Lu Yi finally felt that it was about time. He had spent about 8,000 spirit jades. One had to know that the things he bought were not very expensive, yet he still spent so many spirit jades on them. From this, one could see how much they were worth. After completing the transaction, Lu Yi immediately left the 88th hall. It was too noisy here, and it was not suitable for what he was going to do next. After entering another hall, Lu Yi found a corner and casually set up a spirit formation to cover a small area around him before sitting down cross-legged. Many people did the same thing as him. Most of them were recovering from their injuries. Even cultivators who did not know the Tao of spirit formations could buy a spirit formation disc to make a simple arrangement. When others passed by, they also tacitly understood not to disturb him. Lu Yi took out some materials he bought from his storage ring and circulated his spirit force to surround and smelt them. He wanted to refine the identical spirit formation disc, but it was not the same as the previous one. He wanted to make some changes to the spirit formation disc. What he wanted to change was not the identical spirit formation disc, which could not be changed for the time being. He mainly wanted to add a restriction lock to the spirit formation disc, just like the restriction locks on storage bags and storage rings. However, it was not the same as ordinary restriction locks. The effect he hoped to achieve was that if someone rashly dismantled the spirit formation disc and pried into its mysteries, it would trigger the restriction lock and cause the identical spirit formation disc to self-destruct. This required the use of the explosive spirit formation disc. This was not difficult. When Lu Yi was still in the 9 provinces, he had such an idea. However, because the identical spirit formation disc was too complicated, even if others dismantled it and pried into its mysteries, it would be difficult for them to refine it in large quantities. Therefore, he did not put it into action. Now, the situation was different. The universe was not the 9 provinces. Here, there was Yu Yao in the sunshine. There were many capable experts. If the cultivators of the 9 provinces could not do it, the experts in the universe might be able to do it. If the spirit formation disc was leaked one day, the major forces would definitely organize people to study it. And in Lu Ye's plan, this day was probably not too far away. Of course, even if it was a sunshine expert, even if they pried into the mysteries of the identical spirit formation disc, it would not be easy for them to refine the spirit formation disc in large quantities. He had the talent tree and could casually construct spirit formation discs. So what if others were sunshine experts? The success rate of constructing such a complicated spirit formation disc would not be too high. However, he still had to be sure. It was for no other reason than to delay the time the major forces had to study the spirit formation disc. While he was studying how to add a restrictive spell to the disc formation, Chu Shen appeared in the hall numbered 1513, looking refreshed and energetic. It took him some time to refine the profound light, but the benefits he gained in this short period of time were many times faster than his normal cultivation. This undoubtedly greatly increased the speed of his cultivation. Chu Shen excitedly picked it up to check. His brows furrowed slightly. There was no other reason. This was a message from his mother. His mother was good at everything, but she was too controlling. Since he was young, she did not allow him to do this or that. He had not been to the Wanxiang Sea since he ascended to the constellation realm. The last time he ran away from home, he wanted to go to the Wanxiang Sea to broaden his horizons. He was a local cultivator of the Wanxiang galaxy. If a local cultivator had not seen the Wanxiang Sea before, wouldn't it be a joke? However, he did not expect to be discovered by a guy on the way, and even be captured. It was really embarrassing. Originally, he was going to be confined for a few years. However, the Constellation Hall had suddenly opened, which gave him the chance to leave the Ling realm. That was because his mother also knew that with such a great opportunity in front of her, it would be too unreasonable if she still tried to stop him. Yu Yao could run amok in the Wanxiang Sea, but not in the Constellation Hall. Everyone who came and went here was at the Constellation realm. With his life-saving methods, as long as he was in the Constellation Hall, no one at the Constellation realm could do anything to him. The message from the note was very simple. It only had one sentence. "My son, how are the results? Are you invincible?" The message came so promptly. It was obvious that his mother had been trying to contact him. However, the note could not send messages when he was fighting. The message could only be sent when he returned to the Constellation Hall. Chu Shen pursed his lips. His mother was treating him like a big shot, a Wuzuan. There was indeed someone who was invincible, but that was not him. He lazily replied, "Looks like my son has gained something. Not bad, not bad." His mother knew him best. If Chu Shen had not gained anything, he definitely would not have spoken in such a tone. Changing the topic, Jiao Yan exhorted, "However, you still need to guard against arrogance and rashness. Keep up the good work." "I know. Mother, you are so long-winded. If you have the time, why don't you go find a man and see if you can get a second chance?" "Little brat, what nonsense are you saying? Come out." "I won't. Come in if you dare." "Come out." "Come in." The note was silent for a moment before another message came. "If you dare, hide in there for the rest of your life. If you dare to come out, I will capture you and lock you up for 20 years. I will watch you every day. Don't even think about leaving more than 100 feet away from me." Chu Shen could not help but slap his own mouth. He secretly hated himself for having such a cheap mouth. If his mother said it, she would really do it. Being locked up for 20 years and not being able to leave more than 100 feet away. How terrifying was that? He hurriedly sent a message to apologize. However, Jiao Yan was clearly angered by him this time. No matter how sincere his attitude was, she ignored him. Chu Shen had no choice but to say, "By the way, mother, didn't you ask me to keep an eye out for talents to recruit? I found one. That person is called Fa Wuzuan. Although he is only at the mid-stage of the Constellation realm, even ordinary late-stage cultivators could not last more than 10 breaths of time against him. His strength is unfathomable. Your son admires him greatly." Jiao Yan was born in Lingjia. She was not only a native cultivator of the Wanxiang Galaxy, but also one of the higher-ups of the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. For a colossus like the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce, their thirst for talents was endless. They had always been recruiting outstanding talents from all over. Before Chu Shen entered the Constellation Palace, Jiao Yan had indeed asked him to keep an eye on this matter when he had the time. It was both to find talents and to let Chu Shen see the difference between him and others. If it was an ordinary talent, Jiao Yan would not be too interested. No matter how powerful he was only a Constellation Realm cultivator. In front of her, he was just an ant. However, a mid-stage cultivator defeating a late-stage cultivator in less than 10 breaths of time was a bit incredible. Such a person was usually the elite of the elites that could only be nurtured by a top realm. However, Jiao Yan did not have any recollection of the name Fa Wuzuan. He was not from any top realm. She then sent a message to someone to investigate the situation. After a while, as Chu Shen waited anxiously, the musical note finally responded. "The one ranked 13th on the rankings?" Chu Shen raised his head to look at the rankings. Indeed, he found Fa Wuzuan's name at 13th. When he first saw Fa Wuzuan, he thought it was someone with the same name. However, after Fa Wuzuan easily defeated a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator, he knew it was not someone with the same name. The Fa Wuzuan in front of him was the one on the rankings. Previously, he was ranked 17th. Now, he was ranked 13th. It was more and more confirmed. "Yes, it's him. Are you sure he is only at the mid-stage of the Constellation Realm?" Mother, your son fought alongside him this time. I even helped him put in a lot of effort. I definitely didn't misjudge his cultivation. Tell me more. Jiao Yan was interested. End of chapter. Chapter 1413. Chu Shen then told the story of the dispute between the 4 teams on the Desolate Star. The whole process was not complicated, because after he and Lu Yi had gathered, they had encountered a total of 3 battles, and all 3 of them had been won cleanly and cleanly. He was quite eloquent, and the 3 battles were like a picture scroll in front of Jiao Yan's eyes, allowing Jiao Yan to see many details clearly. After Chu Shen finished, he asked again, Mother, this is a good talent, right? Do you need to recruit him? If you do, I can help you. When we parted, I specially exchanged musical note imprints with him. Jiao Yan did not immediately respond, but pondered. Fei Wuzuan, this name sounded like a real name, but also like an alias. However, from Chu Shen's description, one thing was certain: this person was not a Dharma cultivator, but a weapon cultivator disguised as a Dharma cultivator. That was why he was able to show his true abilities when facing more enemies. If Chu Shen did not exaggerate, then this person was indeed a great talent. Even Jiao Yan, who had seen many talents from all sides, could not help but be tempted. However, what Jiao Yan was most concerned about was not the extraordinary strength displayed by this person, but something else. The treasure in his hand can allow the 3 of you to easily connect and form a formation? Yes, that treasure is very powerful. Tell me what the treasure is like. Chu Shen was impressed by Fei Wuzuan's personal strength, and his mind was filled with thoughts of becoming someone like Fei Wuzuan in the future. However, Jiao Yan could see more. With different experiences and standing at different heights, it was natural for one to view things from a different perspective. Chu Shen thought for a moment, then said, It's nothing special, just an ordinary formation disk. You can see it everywhere outside, but its power is very mysterious. When the 3 of us formed a formation, we were able to kill those people without any power to fight back. Right? He said that treasure is called the Twin Chi Linked Branches Formation Disk. Twin Chi Linked Branches. Jiao Yan fell into deep thought. After a long while, she sent another message. Contact him and ask if he is willing to sell that formation disk. If he is willing to sell it, buy it at any price. Chu Shen was slightly stunned. Mother, although that thing is quite mysterious, it seems that the range of its power is limited. At most, it can only support 4 or 5 people to form a formation. Even if it has some value, it's not worth spending a lot of money to buy it, right? Jiao Yan said earnestly, You're still young and haven't come into contact with many things, so you don't understand. If that thing is really just a treasure with mysterious power, then it's fine. But since it's a formation plate, then it means that there are mysterious spirit inscriptions playing a role in it. Those spirit inscriptions are most likely the same spirit inscriptions that he mentioned. I've never heard of or seen these spirit inscriptions before. If you can get that formation plate, dismantle it, and decipher the structure of the spirit inscriptions. Chu Shen immediately reacted, then we can organize people to refine this Twin Chi Connected Branch Array disk. Zhu Yan said, If this thing can really be refined in batches, it will have a huge impact on the current cultivation system. Therefore, this treasure is extremely valuable, far more valuable than you can imagine. I know, I'll contact him now. Mother, you're so amazing. Chu Shen praised and did not forget to flatter his mother. Jiao Yan did not fall for his trick. If you can redeem yourself this time, I won't care about what you said just now. If you can't, then you can wait for 20 years of confinement. In the 1513 hall, Chu Shen's face was wrinkled like a bitter gourd. After a while, he found Fei Wuzuan's mark in the note and sent out a message. Big brother, are you free? There was no reply. Big brother, I have something to talk to you about. It's a good thing, a very good thing. There was still no reply. Big brother, please do me a favor and save me. I can't live anymore. After sending a few messages, there was still no reply. He guessed that Fei Wuzuan was probably busy with something and did not have time to check the note. So he waited for half a day. When he sent another message, Chu Shun was a little dumbfounded because he could not send it out anymore. This undoubtedly meant that Fa Wuzuan had entered a battle through the door. At this moment, Lu Yi was participating in a battle in the form of an arena battle. Naturally, he had seen the message Chu Shen had sent him. He vaguely knew why Chu Shen was looking for him. The only thing he didn't understand was why Chu Shen looked so miserable. It seemed like he couldn't live anymore. The plan in his mind was going smoothly, but he still needed more time to operate and ferment. This was because only then could he gain more benefits and become a fatty in one bite. However, if he wanted to operate and ferment, he still needed an opportunity, like the opportunity where several teams fought together like before. It was impossible for him to fight a one-on-one battle like he was doing right now. Spiritual jades were the key to cultivation in the starry sky. With spiritual jades, everything was easy. Without spiritual jades, it was difficult to move an inch. It was the same logic as mortals who had money or not. However, what he lacked was spiritual jades. In the past, when he could still fish, he could still rely on the high-value whitey spirit to satisfy his cultivation needs. Furthermore, the efficiency of his cultivation in the depths of the Wanxiang Sea far exceeded that of ordinary cultivation methods. The time when he fished with Pu Ku was the time when his cultivation grew the fastest. However, with the sudden arrival of Yujichi, this way of making money was cut off. It was also unrealistic to go to Recruitment Island. The only time he experienced it was when he was tricked by Zhu Yuan to go to a desolate star. If he had not met Ma Bin but Ri Ri, who harbored ill intentions towards him, he would have been buried long ago. Therefore, since then, Lu Yi had been looking for a suitable way to make money. After deducing the Holy Guardian Spirit rune, the reason why he chose the Spirit and Branch Spirit rune was partly because he was considering the 9 states, and partly because Lu Yi wanted to make money for himself. The new Spirit and Branch Spirit rune were successfully deduced, and the refining of the new formation disc was also extremely simple. Lu Yi could sense that once this thing was leaked, it would definitely attract the attention of various forces. However, a man's wealth was his own ruin. If he really rashly threw out the formation disc, it would only bring him a huge risk. How to safely push it out and how to make money while ensuring his own safety were all problems he needed to consider. He had thought about whether he should reach a cooperative relationship with the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. He would refine it himself, give it to them to sell, and then split the money. He had the 1,000 Faces and the Imitation Might Spirit rune, so it would not be a problem to disguise himself. However, he only had the constellation. Behind the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce was Ri Ri. If he was really targeted by Ri Ri, even if he had the 1,000 Faces and the Imitation Might Spirit rune, he might not be able to deceive them. At that time, he would still be in a bad situation. Lu Yi was not going to entrust his safety to someone else's mercy. It was not until the sudden appearance of the Constellation Hall that he saw a good opportunity. Therefore, when he entered the Constellation Hall to leave his name, he decisively gave himself an alias and changed his appearance and attire. At this point, the opportunity was there. He only needed to wait quietly for the opportunity. The battle that he had experienced with Chu Shen was an excellent opportunity. Therefore, he did not hesitate to take out the Spirit and Branch Spirit rune formation disc and led Chu Shen and Lucky Star to kill in all directions. If it were not for the formation disc appearing more often, he would not have to go through so much trouble. It was difficult to act alone, but as long as the enemies he encountered were not at the level of Wei Yijin, he might be able to succeed. At most, he would need to spend more time and energy. Now that Chu Shen contacted him, it was obvious that he realized the great value of the formation disc. However, Lu Yi did not plan to sell it at this time, even if he had already added a restriction lock on the formation disc. Because no matter how great the value of a formation disc was, it was still limited. What Lu Yi wanted to sell was not just a formation disc, he wanted to sell a lot. He had a premonition that this was not a long-term business. Since it could not be long-term, then he would do his best to gather as much wealth as possible in the shortest amount of time. Moreover, if he only sold one, he would definitely offend the buyer. This was because this thing was not unique and could be casually refined. If the buyer bought it and found that someone else had it, they would definitely think that they had been cheated. If they sold a lot of them and allowed all the major forces to buy them, then no one would feel that they had been cheated. This could be considered a way to share the risk, to ensure their own safety as much as possible, and to reduce their own influence on this matter. As for what kind of impact the sale of so many formation discs would have on the existing cultivation system, it was not something that Lu Yi needed to worry about. The world of cultivators had existed for so many years, and there were always some new things that would trigger changes in the entire world of cultivators. However, the world of cultivators, as a special group, was very adaptable. The existing system might have some changes because of this, but it would never be destroyed. No matter what, for Lu Yi, making money was the most important thing. Everything else was fleeting. And if he wanted to make the formation disc famous as soon as possible, he naturally needed more opportunities to display it. Therefore, in the following period of time, Lu Yi would refine a formation disc after every competition. In order to increase the efficiency of refining, he even condensed a doppelganger each time, his main body and doppelganger going into battle together. When he was in the Divine Sea, he could refine a lot of formation discs in a day. Now that his cultivation had reached the middle stage of the constellation realm, his efficiency was many times higher than before. Before long, he could easily refine 100 or 200 formation discs. Then, he would step through the door and enter the competition grounds. Most of the battles he encountered were still one-on-one battles in the arena. There were only a few battles where he teamed up with a different number of companions. Every time he encountered a situation like this, Lu Yi would immediately take out the formation disc and explain its uses to his temporary companions, letting them feel the power of the formation disc. He was like a peddler trying to sell his goods. If it were other middle-stage constellation realm cultivators, they might not have the right to speak like this. This was because in every competition, there would be a late-stage constellation realm cultivator as a teammate. Their cultivation was higher, so they naturally had to be the leader. However, Fa Wuzuan's name was still on the rankings after all. He was ranked very high, so people had to pay attention to him. After a few times, although the twin chi formation disc had gained a bit of fame, it was only circulated in a small circle. It was far from Lu Ye's expectations. End of chapter. Chapter 14:14. Lu Yi wasn't in a hurry. He was waiting for a good opportunity, because according to the information he received before, there was a good opportunity to display the twin chi connected branch formation disc. However, whether he could grasp this opportunity or not still depended on his luck. Time passed, but he didn't stop his various operations. He had been refining formation discs in between participating in the competition, accumulating the number. On the ranking board, his ranking had long fallen out of the top 300, it couldn't be helped. Other people who were ranked at the top were seizing the opportunity to participate in the competition, but he spent a lot of time refining formation discs. Naturally, the number of chips he accumulated was slowly surpassed by others. But even if it was a ranking outside of the top 300, it was still a very high position. During this period, there were already many forces inquiring about him, passing on messages to him, wanting to recruit him. Without exception, Lu Yi rejected them all. What he wanted to do was too big. If he was recruited at this time, no matter how good the treatment was, it wasn't enough to move him. After parting with Chu Shun for a month, the opportunity Lu Yi had been waiting for finally came. On this day, he had just returned from a competition and saw many people gathered in front of the ranking board. He originally thought that there would be some big changes on the ranking board, but after taking a closer look, he realized that wasn't the case. Because these people weren't gathered at the front of the ranking board, but at the back of the ranking board. All this time, the ranking board only appeared on the front, and the back was blank, nothing at all. Now that so many people were gathered there, obviously something had happened. Lu Ye's heart stirred and he faintly guessed. When he came to the back of the ranking board, he found that it was as he guessed. On the back of the ranking board, there were 5 large words: 10,000 Battle Royale. The so-called 10,000 Battle Royale could be considered as a form of the Constellation Hall contest. However, it was different from the one Lu Yi had encountered before. There were many people participating in this form. There were at least 10,000 people, and there was no upper limit. It was said that the largest number of people in history was as high as 50,000 people. 50,000 people, and all of them were from the Constellation Hall. That scene was really like a group of demons dancing wildly, extremely chaotic, and the casualty rate was also extremely high. Basically, every time the Constellation Hall opened, there would be at least one 10,000 battle royale. As for when it opened, the time wasn't fixed. Cultivators participating in the contest of the Constellation Hall did not have much autonomy. They entered the contest of the Constellation Hall through the door and met whatever they encountered. The only thing they had a bit of autonomy was the chaotic assembly of 10,000. This was because if a cultivator wanted to participate in this matter, they had to register first. Only those who were chosen by the Constellation Hall would have the right to enter. If they were not chosen, then they would never be able to enter. There were no clear rules in the chaotic battle assembly. These things were discovered by the cultivators who had participated in the chaotic battle assembly in the past. At this moment, many cultivators had left their aura imprints on the back of the ranking board. This was the registration stage. Lu Yi also found an opportunity to leave his aura imprint on it. As for whether or not he would be selected, he couldn't guarantee it. Every time there was a 10,000-person chaotic assembly, there would be a large number of people who signed up to participate. There would be at least a few 100,000 people. Among them, at least 10,000 people would be selected, and at most 50,000 people would be selected. The probability wasn't high. Instead of participating in the battle, he walked to a corner and set up a formation to refine a formation disc, then waited quietly. Because the chaotic assembly of 10,000 was very efficient, the registration stage only lasted for a day. After a day, the results would be out. Then, the cultivators would be given half a day to prepare before it truly began. A day later, the list of participants for the chaotic assembly of 10,000 was out. Lu Yi was slightly disappointed. He wasn't selected. If he wasn't selected, he wouldn't be able to participate. If he couldn't participate, he wouldn't have the chance to display the twin spirit-connected formation disc on such a big stage. This was unacceptable. He had waited for such a long time for this opportunity. Moreover, after this time, he might not have such a good opportunity again. After thinking for a bit, he took out a sound talisman and sent a message. "Did you get it?" The sound talisman quickly responded, slightly excited, "Boss, you're finally willing to talk to me. I didn't offend you. Why are you ignoring me? Stop talking nonsense." Chu Shen quickly responded, I got it. Boss, do you want to participate too? When the time comes, let's join hands again and kill everyone. Lu Yi looked up at the dome and sent a message. Come to the 485th hall. I'll be right there. A moment later, Lu Yi, who was sitting in the middle of the formation, saw Chu Shen looking around. He opened the formation and waved at him. Chu Shen ran over with a smile on his face. Boss, I haven't seen you for a month. I've missed you. Lu Yi looked at him with a calm expression. I want your participation qualification. The qualification to participate in the chaotic assembly of 10,000 could be transferred. There would always be some cultivators who were selected but couldn't participate due to various reasons. Therefore, as long as the cultivator was willing, the qualification could be transferred. When the time came, he just needed to let the Constellation Hall bear witness. The smile on Chu Shen's face immediately stiffened, and he was a little embarrassed. Boss, this isn't good. He was selected by luck. Moreover, for Chu Shen, he naturally didn't want to miss such a big event. Therefore, even if he had a request, he didn't want to agree to it. Then help me find a spot. Lu Yi was already prepared. He didn't know many people here, but Chu Shen was different. He was the young master of the chariot world, the precious son of a sunshine powerhouse. It was naturally easy for him to find a spot. I'll try my best, but I can't guarantee this. Before Chu Shen could finish his words, he saw a kindred spirit array disc appear in Lu Ye's hand. His eyes immediately widened. After hearing his mother's explanation, how could he not know the value of this item? He had been trying to contact Lu Yi for the past month because of this array disk. After the matter is settled, I'll give this to you. Chu Shen was stunned for a moment, then he patted his chest. Leave this to me. Lu Yi nodded. Under Chu Shen's reluctant gaze, he kept the array disk. Without further ado, Chu Shen immediately took out a sound talisman and began to send a message to the outside world. Obviously, he was going to ask Juyen for help. It wasn't easy for him to ask others to give up their participation qualification. Juyen's words were the most effective. While he was busy here, Lu Yi had already arrived at the 88th hall. He wanted to buy a long saber. In all the previous events, it wasn't a big deal to use his mountain pan saber. There were many weapon cultivators in the world, and there were many who used sabers. The mountain pan saber's appearance wasn't strange and could be considered very ordinary. So even if he fought with the mountain pan saber, it wouldn't be a big deal as long as he didn't leave behind any images. However, the chaotic assembly this time was different. When the time came, the Constellation Hall would show the scene of the chaotic assembly. In other words, the cultivators who stayed in the various halls could immerse themselves in their thoughts and observe the various situations of the chaotic assembly. Under the gaze of millions of people, he didn't want to expose anything related to himself. Finding a replacement saber was very important. Even if it would affect his ability to display his strength, he didn't care. In the 88th hall, Lu Yi searched in front of the various stalls. It didn't take him too long to find a suitable saber. Its appearance was very similar to the mountain pan saber. This was necessary because if the appearance was different, it would greatly affect his ability to display his strength. It was lighter than the mountain pan saber, but this couldn't be helped. When Lu Yi forged his own mountain pan saber, he intentionally added some materials to increase its weight. This saber named Crimson Dragon met Lu Ye's requirements as a whole. Moreover, the entire saber gave off a blood-red glow, which was very eye-catching. The quality was also quite good. It could be considered a supreme-grade spirit treasure. After haggling with the stall owner, Lu Yi bought it for nearly 7,000 spirit jades. This price was quite expensive because ordinary spirit treasures only cost around 2,000 to 3,000 spirit jades. The better ones only cost a bit more than 5,000 spirit jades. 7,000 spirit jades was undoubtedly a bit more expensive. This was because its quality wasn't bad, but also because it was sold in the Constellation Hall. Lu Yi estimated that if he really bought a spirit treasure like this in the Wanxiang Sea, it would only cost around 5,000 to 6,000 spirit jades. However, for what he was about to do, now wasn't the time to haggle over such trivial matters. After he bought the Crimson Dragon, Chu Shen had already sent him a message, telling him that everything was done and that they were only waiting for the chaotic assembly to begin. Chu Shen's efficiency was quite high. Come to think of it, he had been trying to contact Lu Yi all this time for the sake of the formation plate. Now that he had gotten one for free, he would naturally do his best. When Lu Yi returned to his original hall number 485, he saw a young man standing beside Chu Shen. This person was undoubtedly qualified to enter the chaotic assembly and had been chosen to give it to Lu Yi. When they met and greeted each other, the young man's attitude was very respectful. He had probably received Juyen's instructions. "Boss, I found him." "That thing?" Chu Shen stammered. He had promised Juyen that he would get it. If Lu Yi went back on his word, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. "I won't shortchange you. When I come back, I'll give it to you," Chu Shen muttered to himself. The chaotic assembly was chaotic and everyone was fighting for supremacy. Fa Wuzuan really did need the formation plate. When the time came, Chu Shen would follow him. With the help of the formation plate, he wouldn't force it. Moreover, he was confident that Fa Wuzuan wouldn't lie to him about this. Half a day later, Chu Shen's expression became serious. "It's begun." As his voice rang out, the void in front of him distorted and turned into a small door. At the same time, a small door also appeared in front of the young man. Not only were the two of them like this, but several other people in the hall were also like this. These people were undoubtedly qualified to participate in the chaotic assembly. Through this small door, cultivators could enter the chaotic assembly. The transfer of qualifications also needed to take place at this time. Lu Yi walked towards the door in front of the young man, but just as he was about to enter, he encountered a huge obstruction and couldn't move forward. The young man looked at Chu Shun, who nodded at him. Only then did the young man's heart move. The power that was blocking Lu Ye's path suddenly disappeared without a trace. The moment before his figure disappeared, Chu Shin's voice rang out. "Boss, go in and contact them. I'm coming to find you." End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.